Hi guys, welcome back to the workshop and hello to any new subscribers. Glad to have you on board and along for the trip, as it were. Now, today's video was originally starting out as a repair job on these stainless steel landing legs off a catering trailer. But I thought we'd say, given the fact that most people will come across a trailer in some shape or form, either you borrow it from somebody, you rent one, or you buy one, that a little bit of more detail would be useful. It's a general enough topic to be of use to people anyway, I hope. And so that's sort of how it expanded into a video all about jack legs, jockey wheels, landing legs, leveling legs, etc, etc. So what I'll do first is I've done two clips outside. One is showing how to hitch and unhitch a normal twin axle trailer for behind the Jeep, and the second one then is a much heavier duty landing leg system for taking much more weight. So what we'll do is just cut to those, and then we'll come back here and then we'll go through how these operate, and then we'll move into the repair of these ones which I'm supposed to be fixing. Now, here we are, and we're demonstrating how to hitch a trailer. Generally speaking, when you park up a trailer, you'll lift the trailer off the tow ball on the Jeep or the pulling vehicle by using the jockey wheel. The same process then when you're hitching a trailer is effectively done in reverse. So the way it works is, generally speaking, there's a locking mechanism on the receiver part of the hitch, and we'll say that either lifts up or there's a little red button or something like that. So what we do then is we lower the trailer onto the tow bar, and we'll say if you're slightly off, it generally is possible to wiggle the trailer around and maybe move it back and forth until it hits the top of the tow bar. Obviously, if you have a reversing camera, it's much easier to get the ball hitch underneath the receiver. So we keep going down, we straighten that up as we go, and that locks into place then, and that provides a firm lock between the drawbar on the trailer and the tow ball on the Jeep. So what we do then, generally speaking, is we have a connection for our lights which goes in there. This red wire is a breakaway cable, and that's attached onto the Jeep, and what that does is it pulls up this handbrake if the trailer separates from the Jeep. So that's connected on underneath onto this handle, and that pulls that up and locks the brakes on the trailer on. Obviously, if you have a trailer with brakes, and they're generally inertia mounted, which means that there's a sort of a significant pressure to let it off, but then it's sort of preloaded, which makes it easy to pull on. As regards then putting the jockey wheel out of the way, and the purpose of a jockey wheel is twofold. Number one, it's designed to lift the trailer off the tow hitch on the Jeep, and then secondly as well, if the trailer is light enough, you can use it as a sort of a third wheel to maneuver the trailer around the place. Obviously there's limitations to that now if you have a sort of a big 2-axle or 3-axle trailer weighing significant weight. So anyway, this winds up, and we'll demonstrate, or I'll take a photograph of it. There's a receiver at the bottom of the outer sleeve, and that receiver should accept the frame there of the wheel. We loosen that clip, then we lift the wheel up as high as we can for as much ground clearance as possible, and then we tighten that locking pin down, and then on the top of the winding mechanism there should be a lock system here, and the purpose of that lock system is twofold, or sorry, there's two elements to that locking system. Number one, the wheel down the bottom should recess into something to hold it, to stop that wheel vibrating back and forth and eventually loosening and coming loose on the road and hitting the road. And the second element then is a lock at the top here, so that vibration as you're traveling along doesn't turn that winding mechanism and again drop the wheel down onto the road. So There's a sort of a two-part system there. So that's how we unhitch a trailer. That's how we hitch a trailer. And now to unhitch the trailer, we do the whole lot in reverse. Now, just as we're on the subject of jockey wheels, the next stage up from that, from jockey wheels, would be a much heavier duty operation, and they'd be sort of called landing legs or leveling legs. You'll find these a lot on Arctic truck trailer bodies or semi truck trailers. And the way they operate is they've no wheel on them. Obviously, they're not designed for moving around. There's way too much weight on them, and they're spec'd way higher as regards capacity for holding weight. Now, effectively what they are is, again, it's sort of a fairly straightforward winding mechanism. There's a leg that comes down out of the outer sleeve there, and a lot of these, especially the ones with a sort of a big box on top, you'll find that they're two geared, or there's two gears in them. And the way they operate then is you pull it out, you wind it, and when you get to the point where the leg is on the ground or just level with the ground, and you'll see the leg extending there at the bottom, and it's quite a quick and easy, or sort of a low geared operation. You feel a bit of pressure come on it then, and the way that operates is you put the handle in and then you keep winding, and that goes into a second gear inside in this mechanism here, and it provides much more lifting power, but at a much slower rate. So that's basically the way that operates. Just from a maintenance point of view, again, grease nipple, make sure that they're well greased. They're sitting outside, they're open, sort of, they're exposed to the elements, humidity, and if moisture gets in there, it doesn't really have a way to get out. So grease is your only protection there as regards keeping them good. So we'll lift this again now. So again, very slow lift until the weight's off, and then we can pull out the handle. And that's it, stowed again. You will find some of the semi-trailer ones with wheels on them. The logic there is that as the truck backs in underneath the trailer to hitch it, the trailer can move back slightly or it can be prone to movement, and the wheels just protect the leg from being bent in a bad direction when the truck backs in underneath it on the fifth wheel. So that's the heavier duty landing legs. Now, what I have here on the bench is an old jockey wheel which got damaged, and this sort of will provide a demonstration to us on the basic principles behind jockey wheels and landing legs. Effectively, they're made up of two parts. Number one, an outer sleeve, and number two, an inner sleeve. The inner sleeve will have a threaded section here at the top, or a female thread, and the outer section then, down there in the depths of that, it's coming up as far as here maybe, there's a threaded bar section there which mates into this, and as you rotate the handle, it turns that threaded bar and pushes the inner sleeve in and out by pushing it against this. Some of these will have the winding mechanism at the top. Heavier duty ones, or ones where the top isn't accessible, will have a gear mechanism at the side, and the ones we'll be looking at in a minute are like that. And they're sort of fairly basic, so it is well within the remit of any homeowner to take one apart, have a look at it. It may be fixable rather than buying a new one. What actually happened with this one, when I was doing the demonstration of the hitching and unhitching, I mentioned that there's generally recesses or some type of lug lock system. In this particular instance, there's two cutaways here on the end of the outer sleeve, and they match into the bracket there for the wheel, or the sections that hold the wheel. So when that's fully closed up, those wheel brackets should sit into those and provide a locking mechanism. Additionally, on the top of it, there's another little locking mechanism here, sort of a spring mounted little pin job, and that locks in there and stops that rotating. The logic behind that, as I said, is to stop the the whole lot vibrating out, which they do on the road, and it can happen quite easily. And more than likely it happened this one, because there's a good bend in this one. I don't know how you can see it in camera, but there's a good bend there. So I'd say what happened there was this wasn't locked in properly, and it vibrated away out on the road and then hit the road at some point, or something like that happened, and bent the inner sleeve. But in fairness, it's still good for parts. The wheel is good, the little axle is good, the outer sleeve and the winding mechanism is good, so well worth keeping for parts. So we'll put this one aside for a moment now, and we'll move on to the next style. These are from a catering trader, I think. They're fairly well made. They're made out of stainless steel, and the welding is nice, and the general fit and finish is good. These are made up slightly different now than the jockey wheel ones, where you have an additional mechanism here at the top to turn your ball screw or your threaded bar. There's a little gearing system here where you can do it from the side. These would be sort of common enough where you don't have access to the top of the leveling leg, or they do allow a bit more in terms of putting a handle on them and giving a bit more torque. So effectively they operate is, there's 3 sections of this. This section here is just a pin and lock system. That's for, you drop it close to where you want to end up, so you don't have to be winding and unwinding all day. So we can take that out for the moment. I'll have to get pins and clips to replace these ones to bring them. And effectively what we have here at the top then is a little winder here. And as we wind that, what should happen is that sleeve comes in and out, okay? So what we'll do is we'll reset the camera now, take this apart and see what the problem is. Generally speaking, there's 2 points of failure on these. Number one is that the gears inside one of these, there's little split pins or little cotter pins to hold them in place, and they can crack. Or secondly, with the more expensive leveling legs, what you'll find is that there's a bearing underneath the threaded bar, or between the threaded bar and the outer sleeve, and that bearing can collapse. And generally when the bearing collapses, it seizes, and then the little pins break in the handle again. So what we'll do is we'll get taken apart and see what's up with this, okay? Now, we're set up in the vise here, and this fella here is our winding mechanism, or the end of the winding mechanism. Generally these come with a handle or something like that, but this is fairly straightforward. It's a 19mm or a 3/4 inch spanner, winds it, so that's sort of fairly adjustable. So what we'll do is we'll start opening up now, and we'll take the cover off here, and we'll get a part straight. Now, when you do start taking stuff apart, probably not a bad idea if you're not, familiar with what you're doing, is just to take a few photographs as you're going along, especially where there's washers and springs or clips or stuff like that. Very, very useful reference to look back on and see how something was put together when you took it apart, especially if you have to go away and get parts, and then you're only coming back in maybe a week or so's time. Oh, that's not good now. Right, that's what we have in here. Now, as I was saying earlier, the same principle applies. There's the top of the shaft for the threaded bar comes through a hole here, and we'll say that little gear sits on top of that threaded shaft, or sits on top of the shoulder there on top of the threaded shaft. And then as we turn this fella here, you can see there that there's a mating gear there, and that mating gear turns this fella and then moves the threaded bar sort of clockwise or anti-clockwise, and that moves the leg up and down. So our first problem, and I say that optimistically, that we might have more problems than that. We'd have a number of issues here. Number one, this should be pushed in the whole way so that it's meeting this fella all the time, as opposed to floating. That's one problem. And the second problem then is obviously the pin missing out here, which goes through that shaft. So to get the pin out, or the remaining broken bit of the pin out of that shaft, we'll probably have to take the shaft out and take out the remaining bit of that pin. And what we'll do then is I'll actually take the whole lot out, and what we'll do is we'll have a look up inside. I think there's probably a bearing between the top of this inner leg and the housing of that. Okay. Right, now we have everything disassembled and we've identified where our problem is, and effectively we have two of them. The first one anyway is that the bearing sitting on top of that shoulder there, on top of the threaded shaft, is collapsed, and we'll have a look at that. As you can see, the cage with the bearings actually in it is very bent, missing a few of the bearings as well. So that's a non-runner, so we'll get rid of him. Now, as luck would have it, I have a spare bearing, and just for information's sake, these are not your normal bearings. These are what's called thrust bearings, and they're designed to take a load onto the bearing itself like that. Generally speaking, bearings, we'll say in wheels and rotary systems, would operate like that, and they're designed to take the load that way. If you put a normal bearing into something like this, you collapse it fairly quick. These are designed to operate flat and take the load this way, okay? So that's what thrust bearings are. So effectively come in three parts, just sort of an outer cage with a track in it. There's the ring of ball bearings, and then another matching track for the other side. So that just sits in that, and we'll grease that up now before we put it on. And then just a little rubber or a plastic insert in the middle. Not 100% sure what function that provides, but it's neither here nor there. So we'll grease that, and I'll just stick a little bit of copper grease on it. Now obviously if you're doing something like this, probably not a bad idea to wear a pair of rubber gloves or plastic gloves or something like that. It tends to get messy. Right. So we have our bearing greased. I'll stick him on like that. Okay, and then the shoulder of that shaft, or that threaded shaft, should sit up here. What we'll do is we'll line that up now, just to make life easy for ourselves. And we'll put it in a 12 o'clock position. Okay, because we need to insert our other bits then. So we'll push him slightly back down. We need to feed washers and the gear on then. These are the two washers. They're in fairly good shape. So we stick them in first. And our next bit then is the actual mating gear then. So we stick him in there, and we keep the recess pointed to 12 o'clock as well. Make life easy on ourselves for locating the pin afterwards. Okay, and we stick our shaft in the whole way then. And there should be very little play then between the shaft. Okay, what I've done now is I measured one of the older bits of the split pin that came out of it, and it turned out to be a 4mm pin. And I have one here. You can get these in a sort of a tractor supply store. I have a box there with a range of different sizes and diameters. So he goes in here. And he doesn't need to go in the whole way. And the shaft then should mate on that gear. Right, so here we are now. We have our bits and pieces stuck back together. When we turn the handle here, that shaft should rotate like that and the gears mate. That's good. And what we'll do then is we'll turn this, and then the inner leg or the inner sleeve should rotate out. And as you can see there, as we turn that, the leg is coming out here. So that's one repaired. So what we need to do then is just stick back on the cover. Right, that's our landing leg repaired. What I'll do is, just before I send it back, I'll make sure that the grease nipple here, or the grease zerk, is working, and grease that up. And also I'll find a pin for here, a spare pin for that just drop leg section there, okay? So that's about the size of it. I hope this was of some use to you. If you have any questions, stick them in the comments down the bottom there, and if I can, I'll answer them. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.